Hi guys, my name is Tom and I'm the Tech Chap, and welcome to my definitive Apple Watch review. Thank you for joining me. Now let me start by asking you a question if you don't mind. Do you think the Apple Watch is a tech must-have, a desirable fashion accessory, or just an overpriced and over-engineered gimmick? The reason I ask is because I think a lot of people will have already made up their minds to some extent. Even if you haven't even bought one or tried one, I reckon you probably have a fairly strong opinion one way or another on the new Apple Watch. Now I think this is the case because there are always two parts to a new Apple release, especially one that creates a whole new category of device. On the one hand, you have the actual watch, which of course tells the time and measures your heart rate, and you can check your stocks and your messages and your emails and track your activity and loads more. But then there's also the idea of it, the desirability of it, and of course the hype of it. For example, one person's utilitarian opinion on the practicality of a smartwatch from Apple will undoubtedly differ from someone who just loves the look and feel of it and is buying it perhaps as a bit of a fashion statement or fashion accessory. So whether you already own an Apple Watch, are looking to get one, aren't quite sure yet, you're on the fence, or you've already made up your mind and think it's a complete load of utter rubbish, let me answer two questions for you. Is it any good? Yes. Is it worth it? No. But I should probably expand on that a little bit. Apple claim this is their most personal device yet, and I would agree if you can afford it. Apple offer 3 different versions of the new watch: Sport, Watch and Edition, each made using a different metal, from aluminium in the Sport to stainless steel in the Watch to 18 karat gold in the Edition, with each available in 2 different finishes. As well as that, there are 6 unique interchangeable straps, from bands to buckles to loops, in a variety of colours, and all this is offered in 2 sizes, 38 and 42mm. So with 38 varieties of Apple Watch available, it certainly is Apple's most personal device. However, your personality isn't cheap, and it's actually unlikely many of you will even be able to afford your own personality, as weird as that sounds. Take this watch I'm using to review. It's a fairly mid-range watch, I would say. It's not the Sport or the Edition. It's a 38mm sport band watch, and it costs a mere £479 or $549, whereas the exact same model with a metal link bracelet, something you would typically find on a normal watch, is £819 or $949. Would you pay an extra £340 to get a metal strap? No, neither would I. With such a wide variety of wrist straps available, I recommend you go to a store and try them yourselves. I'm reviewing this watch with the sport style silicone band, as I say. It's the cheapest option, and although I admit it's not the classiest available, it actually feels very nice and is very comfortable on the wrist. So yes, there are different models, different sizes and different straps, which combine to allow the consumer to choose from dozens of models. But when each strap is separated by an £80 or $100 premium, your personality gets very expensive very quickly. But putting cost aside for a moment, the Apple Watch is a beautiful piece of engineering. Build quality is excellent. The sapphire glass, or Ion X glass, on the Sport model protects the gorgeous P OLED display, which is vibrant, bright up to 482 nits, and by some margin the sharpest of any smartwatch on the market, with 290 and 302 pixels per inch for the 38 and 42mm models respectively. It's thanks in part to this OLED technology that the watch appears to have an edge-to-edge display, with the inky blacks invisibly merging with the bezel that smoothly curves back and appears to drop away. This allows circular watch faces to mitigate the fundamentally less attractive square shape of the watch. It's the combination of an excellent display, all metal body, and finely crafted watch crown acting as a home button and scroll wheel alongside a secondary nearly flush power button that gives the Apple Watch an undeniably high-end and surprisingly familiar aesthetic. Aside from preferring a round watch, the only minor issue I have with the Apple Watch is that it's just a bit chunky. At 10.5mm thick, it sits among the Moto 360 and Huawei watch in the over 10mm category. It is less noticeable thanks to the curved edges and rounded corners, however, but viewed side on, I reckon the Apple Watch 2 may be taking a few diet pills. In my opinion then, only the LG Watch Urban comes close to matching Apple's superior design. Now inside the water-resistant body, 512MB of RAM and a custom S1 processor, which is said to offer similar performance to the A5 featured in the iPad 2 and iPhone 4S, power the watch, with 8GB of storage, although only 5.9 actually usable, Wi-Fi N, NFC and Bluetooth 4, rounding up the storage and connectivity. In terms of sensors, the watch includes an accelerometer, gyroscope, heart rate monitor, microphone and speaker. In addition to these fairly typical smartwatch specs, Apple has become a bit sensitive lately, featuring Force Touch and a new Taptic engine. Force Touch, also found on the new MacBook, updated MacBook Pros and hopefully episode 7, distinguishes between a light tap and a deep press on the flexible display, which produces different effects. For example, a forced touch on the watch screen will open up the watch face selection menu. As impressive and user-friendly as this is, I actually think the new Taptic engine, which initiates haptic feedback, is more interesting. Effectively tapping on your wrist when you have a new alert or notification, it works surprisingly well, and as I've recently learned, this relatively innocuous feature can actually have quite a profound impact. A lady called Molly Watt, who suffers from Usher syndrome, has blogged about her experience with the new Apple Watch. Deaf and registered blind, although she can identify large and high contrast text and shapes, she explains how the haptic feedback, which can be intensified by enabling the prominent haptic setting, is incredibly valuable for receiving notifications of messages or calls. This is in addition to other accessibility features, including Siri, VoiceOver, and a zoomed option for text and icons. Miss Watt goes on to say that the best feature using haptic feedback is its use in Maps, which directs her by a series of taps via the watch onto her wrist. Apparently 12 taps mean turn right and 3 pairs of 2 taps mean turn left. So with a solid spec, a host of new features, and once paired with an iPhone 5 or later, the Apple Watch is certainly a capable device. But capable of what exactly? The various customizable watch faces can either simply tell you the time, or depending on the watch face you choose, the time and date, temperature, your location, upcoming events, the position of the sun, and even the moon phase. Or, of course, just a clock with a foot tapping Mickey Mouse. From the watch face, you can swipe down for notifications or up for glances. With 9 by default, you can set up to 20 glances, which work essentially as a favorite app list. It's here you can check your stocks, navigate with maps, measure your heart rate, track your activity, check upcoming events, and even use it as a viewfinder for your phone. It's simple, it's full screen, and as it says on the tin, it's easy to use at a glance. Now, pressing the watch crown on the right hand side transports you to the famous new app interface, littered with dozens of circular app icons appearing like little galaxies in the Apple universe. From here, you have access to all the apps on your watch. However, once you install a few more apps, it does become quite crowded, and I find you need to be quite careful to tap the correct icon. It is a bit fiddly. Of course, you can drag important apps towards the center and enable zoomed mode in the accessibility settings, but that'll make scrolling around a bit of a chore. The bigger problem are the apps themselves. On the whole, the Apple Watch is smooth and responsive, despite taking over a minute to boot up, but there is an odd pause or load, and it does take a split second too long to wake up when you twist your wrist to check the time. But it's minor, and for a first generation device works impressively well. Third-party apps, however, frequently have long loading screens, can occasionally stutter and sometimes crash. It's these delays and lack of responsiveness that, more often than not, make me just want to grab my phone out of my pocket. I genuinely do like the idea of a smartwatch. I think skipping to the next music track, checking your heartbeat while exercising, reading or dictating messages perhaps while driving is bordering on useful, while finding a great looking watch face and speaking into the mic makes you feel like a Secret Service agent is also pretty cool. For pretty much everything else though, it's easier, it's quicker, and it's better just doing it on your phone. Even changing the watch settings is better using the watch app on your paired iPhone. To use most but not all features of the watch, you do have to be in Bluetooth range of your paired phone, and a recurring day-to-day experience for me is either giving up on what I'm trying to do on the watch and doing it on my phone because it's taking too long or doesn't offer quite the same level of functionality, or I'm just double checking to make sure the watch is right, whether that message has sent or that email definitely hasn't come through yet, for example. Part of the problem is you're not always aware when your phone loses signal, mobile data, or its Wi-Fi connection. I could be driving, for example, and ask Siri maybe to call someone or send a message, but I'll be treated to an unending silence because I no longer have mobile data. It doesn't even clearly say if you are lacking in data signal on most of the watch faces. So sometimes I just don't know if I've lost connection, and without the connection, a lot of the functionality of the watch goes down the toilet. To be fair, none of this is necessarily the fault of the Apple Watch. They are just issues generally with smartwatches. But we've been spoiled by our powerful iPhones, and so unless we can see the same level of responsiveness every time throughout the watch, it will always be a more pleasurable and user-friendly experience just using the phone. The other issue, which you knew I'd eventually bring up, of course, is the battery life. Apple officially states the watch's 205 mAh battery should last about 6.5 hours under non-stop workout conditions. Obviously, the battery life depends on what you're doing. If you're just checking the time, it'll last a solid 2 days. But if you're playing music on it, measuring your activity, you'll struggle to get more than 4 or 5 hours out of it. For me, an 8 AM start with fairly typical use throughout the day will leave me with about 10% left by 10 PM that evening. With that, I'd be confident to say you can get a full day out of it, but you will need to charge this every night. Fortunately, charging time is reasonable. Simply place your watch on the bundled magnetic inductive charging pad, and in around 2 hours, you'll have a full charge. However, it's this constant battle to survive the day that discourages me from using a lot of the features or experimenting with new apps. This sort of battery rationing will be necessary for most, but it does just simply take away from a lot of the fun. Now it's time to address the rather expensive elephant in the room, the price. Starting from £299 or $349 for the 38mm Sport and rising to a frankly ludicrous £12,000 or $15,000 for the 42mm 18 karat gold edition model. I'm a reasonable guy, so I won't take into account the edition models when judging the value of the Apple Watch as a whole, as it's just so disgustingly out of touch with normal consumers, representing only a small percentage of actual sales. I'll treat it as a bit of an anomaly and just discuss the Sport and watch models with you. Now the thing is, there isn't even a great deal of difference between the Sport and the watch models. They both have exactly the same features. The Sport has a lighter aluminium body, whereas the watch enjoys a glossy stainless steel body. The Sport uses Ion X glass to protect the screen as opposed to the watch's sapphire glass. The watch also has access to a much wider selection of wrist straps. So aside from the glass then, it's purely cosmetic differences. In hindsight, I would have preferred the 42mm model, as even though I have relatively small wrists, the 38 just feels a bit small. So opting for the 42 and upgrading the wrist strap from the silicone Sport Band to the next level up classic buckle, the model I probably recommend, ups the price to an eye-watering £599 or $699. That's iPhone 6 money. That, in my opinion, is absolutely ridiculous. Reports also suggest Apple enjoys the highest profit margins on the Apple Watch of any of its products. Of course, there's more to a product than its manufacture costs, not least the R&D behind it, but let's for a moment consider the competition. The Moto 360 is £150 or $180, the LG G Watch R is £200 or $300, and most other Android Wear watches are priced fairly similarly, so the Apple Watch is not competitively priced. So aside from the edition models, why are we not that surprised about the high pricing? Well, of course, it's Apple and they'll sell millions of watches anyway, and pricing is part of what makes these Apple products just so desirable. For many, they are sort of aspirational products, and you can get the Moto 360 for maybe half the price, but you want the Apple Watch, that's the point. And that's completely fair enough for some people, but this is where I come back to the question I asked at the beginning. What is it you want out of the Apple Watch? Different people want it for different reasons, and for some, the cost won't even be a consideration. Now, in my opinion, I think the Apple Watch is well engineered, it's great looking, it's fun to use, but in addition to fairly poor battery life, I'm reminded by the progress that we saw between the first and second generation iPads. Now obviously the watch is a first generation device, and so it's going to have a few teething problems, a few errors to iron out, not least perhaps the chunkiness, the battery, and also maybe the apps could do with being a bit more optimized and also a bit more responsive overall. But regardless of that, in my opinion, I just can't justify the price on a personal or even a rational level. So if I bring this right back round to the beginning, is it a good device? Yes, it is, especially for a first generation product. But is it worth it? Well, in my opinion, absolutely not. And of course, your financial and your personal situation will be very different to mine, and that's fair enough. But for me, in this review, I think the pricing is borderline ridiculous. And this is basically without even considering the edition models, which start in the thousands and thousands of dollars. So I think that wraps it up. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this review. Please stay tuned to the Tech Chat because I'll have an upcoming battery and tips and tricks video, as well as a roundup of all the different models that you can buy. And follow me on Twitter at the Tech Chat to keep up to date. And for more, of course, check out thetechchat.com. But there's nothing more to say than thank you very much for watching, and I look forward to your comments and hopefully see you again soon. Cheers, guys.